welcome back to another live edition of the Cross Border Interviews with Christopher Brown. I'm your host, Christopher Brown, and I'm pleased and honored to have our guest in today. He is the leader of the Alberta Party here in the province of Alberta, Barry Morishita. Barry, thank you so much for doing this. It's an honor and a pleasure, as always.
Yeah, thanks, Chris, for the invitation. Always appreciate conversation with you.
I always appreciate you having you on and having just an in-depth conversation about the issues that are facing Albertans and people across this great province. But first, I want to take a moment and mention that we are recording this on June 21st, which is National Indigenous Peoples Day here in Canada. Barry, as the leader of a federal party, I can imagine that this day means something special to you because we honor the people who have come before us and the original settlers of this great country of ours. Do you have anything you want to say just on this special recognition of National Indigenous Peoples Day?
Yeah, thanks, Chris. So it's really cool to be celebrating this day. And I, come to you from Treaty 6 territory here in Brooks and home of many Indigenous cultures and peoples. And blessed to be able to be on the land here and blessed to be able to have these conversations today. In some of my social media, I said it's really important that Albertans, Canadians, we need to listen to what's going on in there. And the Alberta Party has been really thoughtful about that. We have a great shadow minister of Indigenous relations. We have Indigenous board member, and we have so much to learn. And I think the biggest thing is that we should use this day to listen and understand. And then moving forward, we should trust that we can work with Indigenous people in Alberta and do what's best for them. And that will be in turn be good for Alberta. So I'm glad we do this. And it's really exciting to see that conversation continue on.
Speaking of conversations, let's just stay in this area for a little bit, if you don't mind. You have been crisscrossing this province. You have been meeting with people in Treaty 6, as you said, but we do have Treaty 7, Treaty 8 in this province. What are the issues that you are hearing from Indigenous band members, from chiefs, from First Nations communities across this great province of ours? What are the issues that they are facing today?
Well, I hear a lot of frustration, actually, Chris. The 94 recommendations in the Truth and Reconciliation Commission are great things to achieve, for sure, if we can achieve them. But I think to actually, kind of really move on them, we need to fundamentally shift how we think about our Indigenous relations. Now, we've always kind of talked about consultations and those kinds of things. But really, I think what we need to get to is we need to trust that Indigenous have the best interests of their people and the land, is top of mind for them. And I think we have to trust them with that conversation to lay that out first, rather than coming back and consulting. So, I hear frustration with everybody talks about trying to meet these 94 goals, and they are noble goals. Don't get me wrong. If we were to achieve them all, we would be in great shape. But I think to make any real headway on them, we've got to shift how we do it. And I keep hearing that the first thing we need to do is listen, understand, and let them have the say about what goes on first. And I think we could move a lot quicker if we would get into that uncomfortable area and do that first. That's what I keep hearing, and I hope the Alberta Party would bring on policy that reflects that, because that's certainly the direction I'd like to see us going in.
You have talked numerous times on this show and numerous interviews that I've listened to you about the Alberta Party's approach to government and being more of a listening government and not directing government, which we're seeing the top-down approach. Why is that so important in today's age to have a government that listens to experts, that listens to Albertans? Why is that so important to the government, but why is that so important to you as well?
Well, I think we're at a time when people distrust their politicians, and with with good reason. You look, there's lots of examples for people not to trust politicians, but I'm always saying in my addresses to people, when's the last time that you felt politicians or the government trusted you to make decisions, to be part of your service system around you that the government's involved in, be it healthcare, education, social services, Indigenous. When was the last time that the most affected groups of people were actually brought to the table in a meaningful way, and we talk about their concerns? The disability community is another one. You know, where we have rules being made and legislation being built by able-bodied people, by people that don't have disabilities, by people who can't possibly have that perspective. And the only way we're going to be able to move forward with all the incredible resource that's available in every one of these communities is to engage them directly. So first, government has to trust them and say, hey, you're a healthcare provider. You tell me what's the best way to provide healthcare. Let's see what we can get to. And if we, that's so important to me, because in my life as a municipal politician, that's how you fix problems. You talk to the most affected, you heard from the most affected, and then as a group, you got together and made a decision. And people felt like they had were part of the process. And that's one of the biggest things missing in our society when it comes to governance right now, is people don't feel heard, they don't feel they're part of the system, that the system overtakes them. And that's not how it should be, and that's not how it'll be if I'm in charge.
So how do you change that? Because you bring up a good point. Not only has the government stopped talking to the people, but the people in some sense have stopped talking to the politicians because they don't feel like they're being heard. I was at the nomination meeting and the candidate selection meeting for Kerry Condell in Calgary Elbow, and you made an announcement there which was very shocking to me, because I had never heard it come out of your mouth. And you said at that meeting, which we had taped and we have it on record, that the Alberta Party, if elected, you will have no whipped votes. You will,
right.
The candidate that is elected will be required to talk to their constituents. That's a big deal in today's society where everything seems to be whipped. So why was it so important for you to say, you know what, we're going to change politics as it's done and go back to a more grassroots type of politics of yesteryear?
Yeah. You know, well, there's two reasons. That's when we were most successful as a province. You know, when we were really, when the government, I think, was really in tune with what was going on and looking at the future and bringing those communities with them into that future, was, you know, the early 70s when Peter Lougheed was running Alberta, to be quite honest. We transformed the government, we transformed the province. And the way we did it was we took people with us. People came with the government. And, there doesn't need to be whipped votes. I mean, you know, when it comes right down to it, we've gotten so far the other way, I guess, so strict, you can't even breathe. Every government MLA speaks from a white paper with briefing notes on it. They aren't allowed to deviate. You know, how do you get any innovation? How do you get any sense of what's going on in a community that way? That's completely lost. Under my leadership, that wouldn't. I want good candidates that reflect their community, love their community, know their community really well. And when we're discussing solutions that are for the province that we vote on as a provincial legislature, but certainly we have to also then keep in mind that different areas and different communities are going to be affected different. And then maybe we have to come to more thoughtful solutions, Chris, so that, you know, this fits for 80% of the 30% of the people or 50% of the people. But maybe our solutions have to be more thoughtful. Maybe they're a little bit different. And that's okay with me. I don't expect the same things to happen in every corner of the province of Alberta. So for us to have that reflected, we can't ram legislation through. So no whipped votes makes a lot of sense for me. If the policy is so bad, quite frankly, and you heard me say it there, that I can't get my own caucus to vote for it, then maybe we need to have another look. And that's maybe going to lead to an improvement in the way we govern.
So just to play a little bit of devil's advocate with that scenario here is, if the Alberta Party forms government, would you not then have a situation where you would need to try and pass bills like the budget, which is not always going to be great for the people of Camrose? It's going to benefit more people in Brooks Medicine Hat or Lesser Slave Lake. So how do you balance not whipping votes against getting legislation passed? Because if you have 87 candidates, 87 MLAs, all wanting certain things, that's going to be a hard task to juggle. Are you up to that task of being able to bring people together and say, okay, we have to look at it as the best for the province and not always just the best for the riding?
Yeah, no, Chris, I think you make a good point, and that's the conversation that has to happen. And I think that's why you have to have a more thoughtful approach to policy building, the rules and regulations you put in. Because if you don't, you're going to have exactly that situation where everybody's going to look at it single-mindedly for their own. Now, they should consider what's important for their constituents and how they're advantaged by or disadvantaged by a piece of legislation or rule for sure. But also, they do have to govern for the province of Alberta. And again, this is me as a leader trusting my MLAs and trusting actually not even my MLAs, all the MLAs, to do the right job for Alberta. We've created such a situation where that question that you ask, rather than being a thoughtful question, becomes a rhetorical question in the government we have today, because it doesn't matter how bad it is, they all vote for them, so it becomes rhetorical. But in my government, it wouldn't be. And yeah, you know what? Do I expect the smoothest path there? Do I expect to have huge bumps in the road? Absolutely. But we are not going to regain the trust of Albertans. We're not going to have better government unless we break the system down that's really squashing ideas and innovation and really taking people out of the game.
I want to turn to bigger issues, and the first one I want to start with is kind of a topic that you mentioned earlier on in your last statement, and that is rural issues. As a province, we typically think of urban issues, Calgary, Edmonton. We often forget about what's happening in rural Alberta. As the mayor of former mayor of a rural community of Brooks, you know firsthand some of the issues that are facing rural Albertans. And the issues down in Brooks are not the same up in High Level, or not the same down in Jasper. So they're always different. But one of the issues that I'm hearing from mayors of small rural communities is crime. Crime is always a big issue when it comes to rural communities, because the resources are usually spread very largely and there's not a lot there. I want to talk about the police force. And
Okay.
you were not prepared for this question, so this is not we usually go into these interviews very green. So the province of Alberta is floating the idea of a provincial police force, getting rid of the RCMP and moving to a provincial police force. Now, I have spoken to mayors in rural communities, and they say, we don't want that. We want to keep with our RCMP because we like our RCMP. We just wish they were better resourced. What does the Alberta Party stand on a provincial police force versus RCMP? And how do we better equip our police force to properly work in our communities, especially our rural communities?
So that's a big question, Chris. But first of all, yeah, no, we want to keep the RCMP, and then there's a couple of reasons. At the very top level, the cost is not worth it. It's just the transition as an estimate is 360 million to change. That alone, there's a lot of other things that are much more important on a priority level than changing police forces to start with. Second of all, the police model that's currently here in Alberta, that is a community policing model, particularly in rural Alberta, has made improvements over the last several years, and it will continue to improve if we continue to invest in it, both from a kind of a partnering program, partnerships with municipalities, as well as making sure that it's properly resourced by everybody. So you have two components when it comes to rural policing. You have a provincial policing component, they pay for some. You have a federal component, you have a municipal component. And the again, you said it very, very aptly. There's a lot of difference between the crime issues in different areas across the province. And we need to be more integrated in our approach about how to deal with those distinct issues of crime. So I met with some farmers and ranchers in southern Alberta here several months ago, and we talked about that. What was driving their rural crime? What was the problem, and how do we tackle it? First of all, they accept that they have longer call times. They don't need it. They don't expect a detachment to be at the front kind of driveway of their farmyard. But at the same time, the underlying issues that are causing crime, they'd like to see some different opportunities. So, we talked about things like intervention for issues, because whether they're drug addictions, whether there's homelessness, whether there's other poverty issues, sometimes it's mental health. our system does not work very well to deal with that on a proactive basis. So even if the RCMP could be there lickety split and pick that person up, the justice system doesn't really deal well with first offense, doesn't really deal well with that type of opportunity crime. In fact, some have told me that it's worse when they go into jail, because when they get out, they're better at what they do, or worse at what they do, is however you want to put that. So they even talked about things like better electronic surveillance. Are there tools out there that can look after those rural areas, make them safer? Because safety is the big issue. And then the other thing was, do there have to be mandatory treatment programs? Do you have to provide mental health support so you hopefully keep people out of the system? There's a multitude of things that are feeding that. And to just say that it's going to be better by changing the police force is a complete fairy tale. The fact is that every community has some problems. They have different issues. They need to attack them, but they need some autonomy to do so, and they need some authority to do so, I think. So you need to drive resources into local communities. If you have, we have a large immigrant community in the city of Brooks. Language barriers, fear of authority is a huge issue for a lot of people. We need different resources to deal with that. In some other area that maybe it's all oil field crime. I don't know, but we trust communities to be able to work those solutions with the current system. We're all going the right direction. We're trying to reintegrate how first response looks. The RCMP recognizes that if they had more mental health supports for first response, they might have better outcomes. So, there's no simplistic solution. Taking control of it by having an Alberta police force, I don't think really does lend us to go there any faster. And the misnomer that, somehow the Ottawa controls the RCMP, the fact is that K Division is answerable to the Justice Minister here in Alberta. They're answerable to their municipal contracts here in Alberta. So that's where the operation hits the road, and we can still improve that without changing and costing a lot of money and disruption.
Now, you know it probably better than I do that this year the municipalities across this great province are going to be faced with a bit of a challenge, because the federal government has given a raise to the RCMP, which is going to be on the back of municipalities. Now, budget is usually February, March. Usually it's supposed to be in December for municipalities, but sometimes they have the tendency to push them a little bit later just to make sure they dot their I's and wait for the provincial government to come out. If elected, how would you ensure that the cities aren't getting downloaded upon, because they're already struggling right now with the rise of costs going through the roof across this province, and now they're going to have the RCMP bill that they're going to have to pick up as well, which is going to have to be passed on to the Alberta taxpayers?
Yeah. So first of all, on the strictly on the RCMP raise, I think there's because there's retroactive play on the go forward. I don't think you can avoid it. That's the cost. That's the cost of the service. That's fair. But on the retroactive part, I think the federal government actually has to be picking up the tab here. Municipalities weren't involved in the negotiations. They didn't set the terms. The terms were set for us, and again, by another level of government imposed on us without really any consultation. And I think from that perspective, if I would be pressing the federal government very hard to take that stand. I know that's happening at the municipal level, and it should be happening with the province. Should be walking hand in hand with them to do that. That being said, if the feds didn't come through with the entire share or a portion of it, we would sit down with the municipalities and have to work that out. Because I know as a municipal politician, it's almost impossible with balancing budgets and keeping things to go back 5 years and then try to make up for that for those lost costs. And I think we'd have to be responsible about it, but we'd also have to be fair. So first approach is I think Ottawa should be paying for it, and then going forward, if that's not all covered, then I think it would be I'd be more than happy to sit down with the municipalities and work something out, go forward.
The next line of questioning is a similar topic. You mentioned a little bit beforehand. It's about our justice system. especially in rural areas. And this, as you can tell, I'm kind of in the rural mindset right now because next week I'm going to be sitting down with some rural mayors and talking to them about their issues that are facing them. And what I hear over and over again from rural communities and politicians in the rural atmosphere here in the provinces, a criminal goes into the justice system, they get a slap on the hand and they're released. And like you said, they go to jail, they find out how to do it better so they're not in jail next time. Is there reforms that we need to be putting into place and looking into around our justice system? Because if we have just a perpetual rotating door here of criminals in, criminals out, and repeat offenders over and over again, is it really keeping our communities safe? But is it also ensuring that our justice system is protecting the people who it's supposed to protect and not just letting criminals back on the street?
Yeah, no, I think that is exactly how we have to deal with it, in terms of that there are some problems in the justice system because we have, it's you sentence them, they get out, they go. There's not really a lot of opportunity to change. You don't look at those underlying things. And I think when you look at, and I don't know the statistics directly, but I know a lot of even the rural crime and crime in general, but rural crime is driven from socioeconomic problems. Not all of it. Let's face facts. There's some bad people out there, and our system should deal harshly with people that are just bad. Don't have a track to get to contribute to society. There should be better ways of dealing with this. But for these ones that are kind of brought in and then go back out and steal another truck or steal the gas or whatever they're doing, property stuff and all that, there's got to be another way to deal with people that have trouble, that have mental health issues, that have addiction issues, have poverty issues. There's got to be a better way of dealing with that. And again, I don't have all of the answers. I just know that our approach isn't working. So it seems to me that, being on this planet for more than 50 years and being in a governance role, that you should learn, and we practically learn quickly, that if you stay doing the same thing over and over again and then expect, a different result, I think they refer to that as insanity or madness. And that's where we are. And you know what? We don't have to change the whole world to do it. We could pilot some things in some areas. Maybe we have an area where we could pilot a program or try something different. But I know that nothing will get better if we keep using the same stuff we have, the same tools we have now. We've got to use new ones. We've got to try new ones, and we'll be in a lot more trouble in 10 years if we don't. So I'd like to see us try some new innovative ways. I listen to people who speak about the issue, and I listen and read about a jurisdiction that has some success. And the fact is that success isn't measured in 100%. Because if it was, I would have never graduated school, Chris. I can tell you that. But I got through, and I was able to move on. And I think that's what we have to look at. If we can save a few people from being back in that system, from breaking into that farmyard, then we've had some success. But I think the only way we do it is we have to try some new things. We have to be willing to try some new methodology, that's for sure.
Moving away from rural issues, but still staying on it in some sense, because this next topic is an issue that faces not just people here in Calgary, but across the province and around Canada right now, and that is inflation. Inflation is on the top of everyone's mind right now. And we are seeing semi-good oil prices, which is good for our budget, but it doesn't translate into passing the buck off to average Joe on the street or average Jane on the street. Should the province be doing more to address the issue around inflation when it comes to our resources, our price of gas? I know it's a federal issue, but this is not just a federal issue. This is a municipal issue. This is a provincial issue. This is an everyone hands on deck issue. Can the province do more to address this issue around inflation on everyone's pocketbook right now?
Yeah, I think there are. And I think we have to be, we can't do everything. I don't think there's a solution in handing out, big checks to people because we have a surplus. But there's also the opportunity for the Alberta Party's policy is that, current generation should be benefiting some from resource revenue, but that we have to also be mindful that the future generations are also benefiting from it. So there's got to be a balance. So, maybe there's an opportunity to provide breaks there. But I think there's a couple of fundamental things. I think, when we look at insurance for one, we only have to look to our neighbor to the east of us to see a government-run insurance company that has, and I've seen the invoices, spectacularly better rates for vehicle insurance than we do in Alberta. And I know Scott Moe isn't a communist or a socialist, but he runs a damn good insurance program by all accounts. And if we, you think about the impactful things we could do. So right now we're looking at that option as a party. I think it's a no-brainer. But when you can chop your insurance bill from $3,000 to $1,500 or from $1,500 to $800, seems to me that would take a significant chunk of that inflationary pressure off your paycheck. And we have a system that already works. We're not very far to go to look for it. So something like that, I think, is important. I think, and it shouldn't only be when inflation is high, Chris. We should be looking for these things all the time, how to do things better. But that's one. The other thing is on, I don't understand all of the distribution pieces of the electricity and all of that. But, we're looking into that type of, is there some systemic things in there that are causing us problems that we shouldn't, that we should be able to feed back? And I think the other thing is that overall we have to be prepared after, going through what we've gone through, that you do have to pay a little bit of the price when, the economy heats up. So I'm not an economist, and I know slow and steady is the way to go, but sometimes, you can't control the world price of oil. It seems to be its own thing. So sometimes, you have to be prepared to live with that because you do get a benefit and a downside. So if we focus on the fundamental things, the things that we have to deal with every day, then maybe we'll have a better track record. So things that are day to day for us, I think we have to look at as a group. And, we're currently considering how that insurance thing could work and possibly something in the electrical and natural gas distribution side. To see if there's some opportunities for longer term relief for Albertans.
I should mention that Carrie Condell was on the show last week. We did a live interview with her last Tuesday, and she mentioned that you guys are having a policy convention here in the future. So these ideas are going to be fleshed out, which I'm assuming will be part of the platform that is going to be presented to the Alberta public before the next election or during the next election, correct?
Yeah, that's correct. And there's actually, so we have the policy convention going on in October, and then also, as you'll start to see roll out really quickly, some more broader engagement with Albertans through some citizen-led democracy exercises on all kinds of issues. And that'll be an opportunity for Albertans to be part of the conversation so that we can hear what they're saying, hear what the important issues are, and whether we're going in the right direction or give us some new ideas to go in a different direction. We're open to that as well. So we had a lot going on over the summer and into the fall.
Turning back to some of the issues, and I want to talk about one that is affecting a lot of people, similar to the lines of inflation, but the housing market. A lot of people, my generation and younger, and I say that as a 37-year-old man now, and I can't believe I'm saying my generation, but here we are. I feel like my grandfather when I said that, are being left out in the cold. They can't find a house. They can't afford a house. Salaries aren't going up, but housing is. We need to fix this, and this is an issue that is the provincial led, and this isn't an issue just here in Calgary. It's across the province. I know we have some policies that you're probably working on, but is this an issue that you pledge to address if elected?
Yeah, and I think again you have to have a thoughtful approach. First of all, you've got to forge the proper relationship. So, the federal government's involved to some degree. The municipalities see it on the ground, but the province has to be on board. And so we have to look at what that approach should be, what that partnership should be. Certainly, there's a good case that there's not enough inventory, and that's what's driving a lot of costs up. Certainly that. Certainly, there are some regional overheated markets just because of the desirability, I guess. And I'm honestly, Chris, I'm not sure what you do about some of those areas. Because if the desire to live in an area is so hyped up, so much higher, you know, I have to. I'm not sure exactly how that works. Although the danger is that then you know you kind of take out an entire segment of a society when they can't afford to live in an area. So I think affordable housing certainly has to be on the radar, but it has to be. We have to come up with some sustainable models for it. Can't and I don't know exactly what that looks like. I was at a affordable housing AGM here in Brooks actually just yesterday, and one of the problems is that the province sets arbitrary rules for how long you know there's all kinds of these things that get in the way, and we've got to have a better approach. I think there's a lot of resource at the community level to do some things if they could count on a steady model, something that could work in their community. But you can't take the Calgary affordable housing model and plant it in Brooks. It won't work, right? You know, we don't have hotels to retrofit. We don't have, that's not what works here. But at the same time, we also have to come up with, to deal with these problems in the inner city areas. Again, those are different. And there's no doubt about it, it's going to take a sustained resource. But I think we have to, again, talk to people who are on the ground saying, what do we need to do? You know, what is that? What is the barrier? Is the barrier that you can't come up with a down payment, or is the barrier the price? Okay, if the barrier is universally the price, then what can we do? You know, I don't know the details of that solution, but right now we kind of just throw out, well, we're going to make everybody have, we're going to have affordable housing. Well, I don't think it's that simple, first of all, and I think it's different in every market. But I think we have to identify what those problems are. We have a great corporate partner here in the city of Brooks that's actually loaning money out of a fund to help people get into their house down payment and paying it back over time. You know, there's, and that was a nightmare regulatorily for them to do. So maybe there's lots of opportunities and maybe the regulation's in the way. I don't know. I think there's ways to do it, but again, we've got to open up the toolbox and try some new stuff.
Which, and then on the flip side of that, and this is just me being a homeowner, and I hate to say this, but I'm happy when my house price goes up, because if I go to resell, I'm going to get more than I bought it for, right? So there are people in this world who are going, I understand that it's hard to get a house right now, but I kind of like that my house price has doubled since I bought it. So that way when I go sell it, which is not going to be beneficial when I go buy a new house, but you know what I mean? So it's...
No, and I think that's where you really have to get down, Chris, and identify the problem for people, like whether, you know, is it there's just so many fundamental different things that are at issue, and then again we just always try to kind of nail one thing down. We're going to do this, and this is going to fix affordable housing. You know what? Not really. There, you know, I've read half a dozen articles. One where say we have too much rental. One where say we have too much concentration of foreign ownership. One where it says we have too many people speculating on homes. Where, you know, there's a whole bunch of things. Some where we don't have enough inventory, but yet there's some markets that aren't like that. So I don't think it's a one thing, but you partner, you get communities to be involved so that they can fix the problem they have, or at least attempt to fix the problem they have. Quit wasting time with the words, just saying, hey, let's fix your problem. How do we do it? What do you need from us? And let's try and go forward.
Is this a province? Is this a province that a one size fits all doesn't work? Because it seems like we've had government after government who has tried to look at it as it's an Alberta issue. And it sounds like, and you're right, the issues of affordable housing here in Calgary are not going to be the same out in Brooks, are not going to be the same up in Hanna, are not going to be the same up in Stettler. So do you need to take Alberta out of the equation and look at it as more of a entities within the province that we have to try and find a solution for, and not just a one size fits all?
Yeah, I think so. You know, housing is an issue across the board. It's maybe a really high priority in Calgary and a low priority in Entwistle or Hanna. I don't know, but again, we can't give the same solution, and the only way to do that is to trust the people that are delivering for you. And too often, the government wants to control all the marbles on the board. They want to control everything. They want to have a say in everything. And so they can't have 87 solutions if there were 87 riding solutions even. We have 87 MLAs. Nobody said they all had to be the same, think the same, do the same, although there are a couple parties that would like that. But, we just aren't there. And recognizing that there are differences is the first kind of step on our way to a better future, I think. And every other issue's like that. Everybody wants to get through school, right? So everybody wants to graduate grade 12. I don't think anybody starts school saying I don't want to. But getting through school in some jurisdictions is different. Kids are different. The sooner we allow people to help people and to guide people that need different resources, different aids, different approaches, the better off we'll be. But if we just keep trying to funnel them through one system, we're going to leave a lot of people behind.
One last area of discussion I want to talk about before we turn into one of the weirder conversations I thought I would never have with a provincial political leader, but we are in 2022 and there's a UCP leadership race. And that is healthcare. I want to talk about healthcare and then we'll talk about another issue here. Last Monday, the province announced that we're moving into stage 3. I think it was actually last Sunday, if I'm not mistaken. We're moving into stage 3, so masks are no longer needed in public transit. Masks are no longer needed at hospitals, only required at long-term care centers. This was sent out via a news release. There was no press conference around it, and everyone went, oh, what just happened here? We're now in a new world, and no one's really given us any time or thought process on how we can move this safely. Was this too soon, or was this the right pace? Because we're seeing numbers semi-stable, hospitalizations are going down. What's your thoughts on what the province announced last week?
So two things. Just on the general management of it, again, you kind of said something very, very telling there. You said, we weren't able to, we didn't understand, we weren't sure what to do. And that's exactly what the province should be doing. The government of Alberta should be informing you enough, Chris, to know what you're supposed to do. You should have understood what was going on before. And that's been a major flaw of the strategy. On the individual, the health mandates or the different rules and regulations, it's really difficult for me to comment on them specifically because I'm not privy to that information either. I don't know how they made that decision, let alone regular Albertans should know that. In fact, I think one of the reasons that early in when we had our COVID issue, and we've talked about this before, was that every bit of information I could get, every bit of information the staff of the city, we were passing on to people in Brooks, so they knew as much as we did, so that they were able to make choices, and people stayed home and people avoided, as much as they could. Were we perfect? Absolutely not, but most of us did a good job. And I think through COVID, through the management that the province has done, and the federal government too, to be quite honest, is they've kept enough away from us so that we do our own research and we've come up with all of these reasons why or why not we should do things. And, I think that's where we are. I don't think you get out of that now. And if we were well informed, I think we would make good choices. I know that if I'm going to see my grandmother and I've been at a conference, I'm probably going to be wearing a mask into that room until we're comfortable, right? Like, I don't want to get my grandmother sick because I think that's what I know. But again, when you just release it quietly, you don't explain what we expect of Albertans to do, that's where we are. We're all a little bit confused and not sure what's to go on. So, I don't know if it was soon or later. I guess, from my perspective, unfortunately, I can't tell you too much about whether it was the right choice at the right time. All I know is that we were all ill-informed about it, and that's too bad.
Well, and just on that note, I'm a political observer. I watch these things, and if I don't know what's happening, and if the former mayor of a city doesn't know what's happening, maybe it's time for someone to get in front of a camera and just have like a 20-minute press conference. And I hate, sounds ridiculous sometimes, but just inform the people.
Yeah, exactly. You're exactly right. Inform us and trust us to make good choices, and most of us will.
Exactly. Now, here's a conversation here I thought I would never have to have, but we are in the midst of a leadership race for the UCP, and it seems like it's on everyone's mind and everyone's mouth, and that is autonomy from Ottawa. Autonomy, 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 and separation from Canada. Leadership candidate Danielle Smith has come out with the Alberta Separation Act, which would say we won't follow any rules that are passed by the Supreme Court. What's your position on autonomy and separation, Alberta Party leader Barry Morishita?
Okay, well, I think she called it the Sovereignty Act.
I apologize. Yes, the Sovereignty
Yeah,
Act.
no, that's okay. I don't want to be seen as painting someone separatist when they haven't said that. But to your point about autonomy and sovereignty, and quite honestly, just they're trying to win a leadership race, and they're doing what they're doing to get that vote, I think. But on a practical point, is Alberta should have never been in a position where we seem to have to beg at the federal table, where we seem to be disrespected. And I think we have to own some of that. I think our leadership has to own some of that. We made Alberta a pretty amazing place in the federation by working with our partners. Do I agree with things that Ottawa's done arbitrarily? Absolutely do not. And I think we do have to stand up and deal with those things, but we should deal with it from a position of strength. And by that, I mean, we should have relations across this country with every provincial leader. We should be providing energy leadership across this country that does not just talk about extraction, but talks about renewables, it talks about technology, that talks about opportunities to have Canada have an energy future. I think we have to talk from a position of leadership on all of those things so that our voice isn't discounted in Ottawa. It's discounted in Ottawa because, in my opinion, in the last we haven't held up our bargain to be good partners, and we've done that for political purposes. We haven't done that for practical purposes, you know. But a federal government that bought a pipeline, right? But did that solve our problems? No, it didn't. A pipeline did not solve our problems. We need a better approach, and that a better approach requires better leadership and a respectful dialogue with others across the country, and lead them into a different way of dealing with things. Quebec needs energy too. Ontario needs energy.
Lower Mainland BC needs energy.
That's right. And we all do. We need it. We need it here. We need winter. We need gas in the winter. We need electricity in the summer. We need all these things to keep our lives going, but we haven't got a very thoughtful Canadian approach to it. And Alberta should be leading it. But by saying, hey, the minute I don't like what you say, I'm just going to close the door, not going to do it. Like, why would you even want to go there? How many successful teams, if they had a player that just said, well, if I don't get my way, I'm leaving. And that's exactly what the Autonomy for Alberta or the Sovereignty Act says. I don't like the way people are playing in the sandbox, so I'm just going to take all my toys and go home. That's not going to work for us. Not going to work for Albertans. It's going to be detrimental. We need a better way to do it. And the worst part is the past has shown us the path forward. Again, Peter Lougheed, when he was the premier, he had such a respect around the table. He had opportunities to forge ties with Premier Davis and Bourassa and even Levesque. Through all of that time, Alberta did really well, and so did the rest of the country. We could get there again, but we need to have a thoughtful conversation about it.
Are people talking about it? Are people talking about a more autonomous Alberta, in your opinion? Because you're talking to Albertans from Brooks Medicine Hat, from all the way up to Peace River Country, Fort McMurray, all the way down to, and I always forget that Livingstone McLeod. I always forget the name of that. I always think it's McLeod Livingstone. Are people talking about this issue, or are they more worried about the bread and butter issues? And by bread and butter, I mean, how do I pay for gas? How do I get money on my table so I can feed my children? How do I make sure my children have a better education? Are people talking about the autonomy issue?
I think that in Alberta's place in Confederation, yeah, I think they do talk about it. I think they feel disrespected because that's the tone of the conversation. When you don't have a solution, you go and blame somebody else for it. That's what our politics have done. We need to get our own house in order, so we don't have anybody to blame on that stuff. So that we actually do have problems with Ottawa, we can point in that direction and say, you know what, we're doing all we can. We've done this. We've set up these partnerships. We're doing the job of leading Canadian energy development in a number of areas. We're doing that. So now, Ottawa, don't tell us that we have to do more than our share. I mean, I talked to a group of people, and I thought it was a great idea. We often talk about how Alberta doesn't get their share. Ottawa's climate change is a big thing. It's a really big platform piece for the federal government. Except right now with the way the carbon tax, the way the incentives come to the provinces to fix, to invest in climate mitigation strategies, Alberta doesn't get a proportionate share. We get blamed because we're 38% of the emissions of the country or something like that. But do we get 38% of the support to mitigate? No, we don't. See, in that, I would say that's a fairness issue. You want us to be the engine of the energy industry. We do have a lot more of the emissions on a percentage as a province. Then how come we're not getting a requisite percentage of the money to mitigate that? So that's something the Alberta Party would look at because that's fair. So I think there's lots of things to do, Chris, that could fix this. But I think Albertans also, for the most part, I think they like being Canadian. They're proud to be Canadians. Do we have a favorable Alberta government right now? I would say we do not. But at the same time, we haven't really asked them the right questions either, I don't think. And that's because we've got a political purpose being served by making them the enemy. So
I want to turn to more local issues now because you are the Alberta Party candidate in Brooks Medicine Hat. Yep, that's the name of the riding correctly. What are the issues facing the people of Brooks Medicine Hat right now? Because you're not only running to be the next premier of the province of Alberta, you're running to be the next MLA for Brooks Medicine Hat. So what are the issues facing the people of Brooks Medicine Hat right now?
Well, I think there's we've always felt like we're kind of a bit of the forgotten area of Alberta. The southeastern corner of Alberta is kind of the forgotten area. We're pretty resilient, stand alone, don't bug us too much and we'll be fine. That being said, however, I don't think, I think when it comes to municipalities and the areas here, I don't think they've had a requisite amount of support, both in two areas, primarily the core infrastructure that municipalities need to make sure that they can service their community. I don't think we've got our share overall, and that's why you need to have a better system of budgeting. It shouldn't be political favoritism, it should be priority based. And then the other thing is that I think from an economic development perspective, I don't think the southeastern corner of the province has gotten their fair share of support from the provincial government. I can think of a couple things in particular when, even though it was really great news that there was a protein processor setting up just north of us up by Strathmore, there's been a number that have checked into southern Alberta. And because the province isn't competitive with Manitoba and Saskatchewan, that's where they've moved to. And you only know that when you go down there and say, why aren't we getting these things? And they tell you why. So there's agricultural supports. I don't think that we don't listen enough. We don't know enough. So I think those have to be supported from an economic development perspective. And then I think the other things are the service pieces that are a concern in most of rural Alberta. And that's healthcare delivery, education availability and accessibility. Recognizing the differences, and sometimes the differences in costs are something we need to really take a hard look at. There's probably a base number that if you could have all students gathered in one place to go from K to 12, you could probably say that's the number. You've got distance, you've got special needs, you've got demographics to deal with. And again, our area has really interesting demographics. In my riding alone, we have two separate demographics. We've got North Medicine Hat and Redcliffe, which are a little older than Brooks. quite a bit older than Brooks demographically. Certainly not the same makeup. We got a lot more, we got 38-40% new Canadians here. But yet we have exactly the same tools to deal with healthcare and to deal with education. You know, if you were a layman to look at that and say, well, you know, how do I deal with an older community versus younger community? Well, you only get the same stuff. Well, that doesn't make sense. And so I think, again, recognizing that we're unique and that we need different solutions here is something that I would fight very hard for.
You mentioned something, and I just want to make sure I understood that correctly. You say you're the forgotten area of the province. It seems like that's a big statement to say. You have had two previous governments. The NDP represented the area, the PCs, or the UCP, I should say, and then the PCs before that. Is this a one-party forgotten corner, or is this both parties that you're talking about, both the NDP and the UCP?
Yeah, I think both. You know, we did have an NDP MLA once. He ended up being the speaker, and I know that's a little bit of a different position. But nonetheless, I still don't, you know, having my involvement with the municipality, I don't know, I'm not as up on it with the new administration in Medicine Hat as to what some of their priority areas are, but I certainly know from the last long time that a lot of the areas that the municipalities are trying to move into, or the areas are trying to move to economic development, or those kinds of things, it was a struggle to get attention down here. It really was. I mean, it just always was. Our hospital is a good example. The Medicine Hat Hospital, the maternity clinic shut down is a good example.
So how do you fix that?
Those things were important.
How do you fix that?
Well, again, I think you have to move some of this authority and autonomy to local areas. You know, if a chronic disease in Medicine Hat is diabetes versus I don't know, something else, maybe, and ours is a high birth rate. Say Brooks is, and we have a very high birth rate. You know, should you have the same dollars in diabetes in Brooks as you do in Medicine Hat? Probably not. But we don't really allow that. It's kind of, and we don't allow innovation to happen. I've listened to some doctors speak about some of these things, whether it was the conversation around contracts or recruiting. We're not paying enough attention to the local level, to the local situation, in order to have better results. And I think the further, quite frankly, even our physical distance from Edmonton makes a difference. I think the fact that we've had, you know, opposition MLAs here. I think that we had an NDP member who was a speaker. I can't remember, you know, when Lyle Oberg was the PC MLA, I think we were pretty well served, but he was in cabinet. So, you know, it does make a difference. It shouldn't, but it does. And I think when you talk to people around here, that's the sense I get. We don't want more Edmonton in our lives. We actually would like them to give us a little more control. And that's what I would like to see happen.
It's ironic that you would say that after talking about autonomy from Canada, and you're saying you want more.
Yeah. No, I think it kind of, I think everybody wants, a priority share of what things are going on, but they don't want it imposed on them. They want to be part of this solution. And I think that goes both levels. I think Alberta needs to be part of the federal solutions, and Medicine Hat and Brooks need to be part of the provincial solutions, but they're just not the same all across the board.
I have one last topic of conversation, then we'll wrap up here, and it's a very simple one. What's next? What's next for yourself? You have a summer coming up here, which I'm assuming if you did not like hamburgers and roast beef, you would dare to not love them by the time you're done this summer tour. What's the summer hold for yourself, Barry?
Well, like I said, we've got a lot going on with getting ready for policy conference in the fall, engaging with Albertans on our citizen-led democracy platforms. That's going to be a big part of what happens. You're right. We're going to go to a lot of communities and be in some parades and view some parades and go stampeding and go rodeoing and meet people in the street. And we're going to do that all summer long. So there's a lot of that. And I'm looking forward to that. I've done that every summer as president of AUMA for not quite as intensely as this, but I've good training for it. I'm looking forward to seeing friends I've met across the province before. And then, you know, it's things will settle down when the UCP settles on a leader, unless they continue fighting about it after the fact, which is definitely a possibility, but who knows. And then we got an election to get ready for. So, you know, we've got a lot of work to do over the summer and hit the ground running again back in September when things start to normalize. But it's just lots of work, lots of fun work, and there's lots of good people out there willing to help me. So I'm pretty excited about the next couple of months.
Well, I am too. I'm looking forward to seeing what the Alberta Party has in store for not only the party but the province. Barry, I want to thank you so much for doing this. This is always a pleasure to have you sit down and chat. The hour always seems to fly by. It does not ever feel like we're talking for an hour, but we talked about some very important discussions today. So I want to thank you for doing that, and so short notice as well. Thank you.
No, thank you, Chris. Anytime you want to chat, more than willing to step up. Thank you.
Awesome. With that, I want to thank everyone for tuning in tonight. We had a great showing. For everyone here at the Cross Border Interviews, have yourself an excellent day. And remember, everyone, just get out from behind social media for 15 minutes and go have a conversation with somebody. It does help our society. So with that, talk to you guys later.